Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee, live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
And good day, good night. Welcome to Soccer Today for November 22nd, 2017. Duane, the first leg of the Eastern Conference last night, got no goals in the first one and a few goals in the second. Duane, how are you today?
Okay, I guess. Yeah, no, TFC got the clean sheet yesterday, and I think that probably was the goal going in. They survived the absence of Jozy Altidore and Sebastian Giovinco. They didn't get the road goal, which means there's still work to do, and arguably the Crew have a minor advantage in the sense that if they score one goal, then they're up a goal and a half basically at that point, right? So it's still a lot of work to do, but you can't. I don't know how to approach this one, Kevin, because it's like, yeah, job done, I guess, but still not that statement game that you're hoping for in the playoffs. Maybe that statement game will come in December. That's got to be the hope of TFC fans.
That truly has to be the hope of TFC fans, that the next game, and maybe the December one, will work better. We're going to have a guest on the line in a second. Patrick Murphy of the Massive Report is going to join us. He was at the game last night to watch and cover the Columbus Crew. Patrick, how you doing today?
Good. How are you guys?
Pretty good, pretty good.
We're good, Patrick. I'm confused on how to react to that game from a Toronto perspective. So I'll just ask you off the top, from a Columbus perspective, how do you feel about a 0-0 game?
Yeah, I don't think you feel great. We talked to the players and coaches after the game, and their message was, a 0-0 tie was one of the results we went into the game willing to accept. Greg Berhalter mentioned that, and the players backed that up. And while I'm sure that, 0-0 is acceptable because you didn't give up that away goal, I'm not sure that's an ideal ideal situation from Columbus. Now you're having to go to Toronto, a place that they haven't been very successful in recent years, and you're going to have to figure out a way to keep Jozy Altidore, Sebastian Giovinco off the board, two guys that obviously didn't play last night and are pretty dangerous. So, yes, you didn't give up an away goal, but I think they certainly expected to score at least one last night and didn't do that. And from talking to some of the Toronto writers that were in Columbus, I think, from that side, Toronto should feel pretty optimistic about the second leg going forward here because, like I said, they're getting those two guys back. They're level on goals. So I think the series is looking good from the Toronto perspective.
Yeah, I mean, from a Toronto perspective, I guess you look at it, you have 2 games left this season at a max, and both of them are at home. If you win both of them, you're champions, and that's got to be the way that they're approaching this right now. And certainly that's not going to be easy, but nonetheless, I guess. It's hard because Toronto FC was so successful in August and early September until that slump hit, and slump's a relative term when you're talking about this TFC team. But regardless,
a blimp on their radar, maybe.
Yeah, fair enough. Patrick, from a tactical perspective, do you feel that Columbus approached the game correctly last night? Were you satisfied with how they approached that game?
No, I really wasn't. And tried to talk to Greg Berhalter about it post game, and I asked him kind of what the game plan was, and he, as reserved as he usually is publicly, he didn't give much. Said that they went into the game with a plan. Toronto obviously came out in a little bit different formation, going with that 4-1-4-1 as opposed to the 3 or 5 in the back that they've played the last year and a half or so. And I think that threw the team off quite a bit. Greg Berhalter said that they made some adjustments in the pregame once they saw the lineup, had to make some more adjustments at halftime to try and get some pressure on the ball. But, I expected Columbus to come out, especially without the two, most dangerous attackers. Not that, a guy like Ricketts and a number of other guys aren't dangerous, but without Altidore, without Giovinco, and really try and attack Toronto, try and build a decent lead before they head back there. And while, as the game wore on, I think you saw Columbus get more attack-minded. I don't know if they pushed any more numbers forward, but maybe Toronto got a little tired, a little more willing to sit back. But I thought Toronto really controlled possession, even though the numbers didn't necessarily make out that in the first half. Possession in important areas, and kind of kept Columbus from real dangerous chances. I think if you go back to the first half, the only real chance was an Higuaín free kick that I think Josh Williams and Ola Kamara almost got on the end, but neither could get a touch to it. And other than that, I didn't think the Crew were that dangerous. Late in the second half, there were a few chances, and if they put one of those away, maybe we're talking about something a little bit different. But I did think it was a strange tactical approach, and maybe that's credit to Toronto and Greg Vance.
I know soccer and the game of soccer is made of two different halves, but this last night was truly a tale of two halves. You had the first half where 45 minutes, Toronto got the ball like 43 minutes of the 45 and just twirling around Columbus players. And the second half was a bit the opposite. Columbus pushing the opportunities against Toronto, trying to get that ball, trying to make something happen with Justin Merriman, Federico Higuaín especially. What was your thought on the few breakthroughs that Columbus had in the second half? Are they replicable? Can they redo them in Toronto next week?
I think there's a chance. If you go back and even look at that 5-0 win for TFC up in Toronto, Columbus had chances, and Greg Berhalter likes to talk about the fact that they, took a risk playing against the best team in the league and in playing a different formation and trying to attack. It obviously didn't work if you look at the scoreline, but there were some opportunities for Columbus, and that game probably isn't as lopsided as the final score reflects. But it is what it is, and I know how difficult it is to play in Toronto. I think I was looking last night at the standings, only dropped points there 10 times all season, which is pretty impressive from an MLS perspective. So, I think they will certainly try and create chances. The approach has to be better, though. The last two games, actually, if you look at 3 of the last 4, Columbus have been held scoreless, and that's not something that this team is known for. Now, one of those games was in Atlanta, and there were plenty of chances. They probably should have scored a goal that was incorrectly called offside. The league has said that, but and they did score 4 against New York City at home. But go to New York City, can't find much offense, have to sit back. I'm curious to see what they'll do in Toronto. I thought Michael Bradley played a really, really good game limiting Federico Higuaín. When you frustrate a player like that, he's not a guy who can kind of seem to break out of that in his career. So it'll be interesting to see if they approach it in a similar vein up in Toronto. I imagine they'll be more offensive, but I think, all to play for, which I think is, from a neutral perspective, from a fan of either team's perspective, I think that's what you want.
Patrick, I'm going to take you behind the scenes with me for a second.
Sure.
Yesterday, well, actually, 2 days ago, the eve of the Eastern Conference Final, so that would be Monday, Dave Lévesque of the Journal de Montreal tweeted that practice, there was only 5 journalists, 2 of Toronto himself, and I imagine yourself another journalist from Columbus, on the eve of what could be the biggest game ever for this franchise. On the day, yes, the coverage was there. The people were there. The press box was full. You almost ran out of food for yourself. But on the day before, only a handful of journalists. How does this affect anything? I want to know if since the last time we had you on the show, Save the Crew, and there's been a movement, or at least the appearance of a movement happening. Is there an actual movement? Does it say anything when only 5 journalists are there the eve of the Eastern Conference Final to cover the team?
Yeah, I think, to answer your second question first on the movement, there certainly is. I think with what we've seen over the last month or so, fans have really gotten behind this team, maybe in a way that they weren't. I think that, the momentum of the end of the season, the 10-match unbeaten run certainly helps things. And then you've got this whole Save the Crew, rally, movement, cry, whatever you want to call it. The fans that are behind the Save the Crew movement are taking a lot of credit for the sellout last night and whatnot, because they believe that they've marketed the team better than the team has marketed itself recently. And it's hard to argue that. The Save the Crew stuff is popping up all over the city. Local television stuff has covered that more than they've probably covered the team in the last few years. Now, to answer your second question, the fact that there were only 5 people out at practice. I think that's a combination of a couple things. One, that, like I said, that the local TV stations and whatnot haven't covered the team as much. We see them out of practice every once in a while outside of the local station that broadcasts the games. So it's not the main priority, that's for sure. But I think another part is, some of the people that cover the team also have day jobs. It's not their full-time gig. So that may have a part of it, given the day. Sometimes at practice there's 2 of us there. Sometimes at practice there's 7, 8, 9 people there. So it just depends, and that may have been just a strange day. But and also last night there were a ton of national guys in the press box, which didn't get in town until the day of the game. So aside from Twelman, I think, who was there the day before. But I do think that you make a point that maybe the coverage isn't where it should be if this team really believes that it should stay in Columbus and that Columbus has its support. Focusing on the Save the Crew movement as opposed to the team and what it's trying to accomplish here.
Patrick, you mentioned TFC's home record, 13 wins, 3 draws, 1 loss, 45 goals scored for 15 against for a plus 30 goal differential. That's pretty ominous if you're a Crew fan. So tell me, how do you figure that this how are they going to approach it? Are they going to sit back and hope for a goal late? Are they going to try and get in the front foot? What do you think tactically Columbus will do in that second leg?
I think that's the $1 million question. Greg Berhalter said last night that a Columbus goal changes the complexion of the series. He's not wrong in that sense. It just is a matter of how many goals Toronto have scored at that point. I think that the Crew will probably come out and try and be as aggressive as they have been recently. There was a recent article on MLS Soccer that I thought made some good points about the lack of possession Columbus have had, not only in the playoffs but in points during this what was the 12-13 match unbeaten streak. They have gotten a little bit outside of their identity, adjusted some, and I think they'll have to do that in Toronto. You can't just go out and try and attack this team, try and outpossess this team at home. I don't think they'll sit back, though. I just don't think that's in their DNA. They tried to do that somewhat in New York City. It almost backfired on them. So I do think they have to, make an effort to go out there and obviously score that goal. I think 2 games that this team could look at for examples of what they should do is the knockout round they played in Atlanta. That was probably the best tactical game they've played, maybe since the Eastern Conference Finals 2 years ago when they went to New York and got the result they need against the Red Bulls. So that, obviously playing in front of a hostile crowd against a team with a lot of attacking options, similar to what they'll face in Toronto. And then I think if you look out at what Houston did to Portland in the second leg last round in the West, I think, the way that they approached that now, Houston obviously has some different pieces, are able to counterattack with a lot of pace, which Columbus doesn't have necessarily. But I think that game plan was a smart one when you're going on the road as the kind of underdog in a 0-0 from a 0-0 first leg. So those are 2 games that I would probably point to from a tactical standpoint. Greg Berhalter has done a good job over this last couple months of figuring out a way to attack the opponent, whether it's been adjusting to a 3-man back line at points. Last night they tried to move Higuain around, which I thought got him a little bit more involved, just things like that. So I do think that Crew fans should feel good in what Greg Berhalter will try and do. I do think they break down opponents very well, but I do think it's going to be a tough task going to Toronto and either trying to get a draw or get a win.
Last night, MAPFRE Stadium was rocking. It was full. It was jam-packed, and even fans couldn't get into the stadium. There was some lineup at kickoff time just because the amount of fans gathering, merging to the stadium, trying to get a ticket, trying to get in. It was a sight to see. Were you impressed by at least the response on the night from the supporters, from the fans, from the local business associations, the business partners? It was a response last night. And if this is the last ever playoff game at MAPFRE Stadium, I was going to say Columbus Crew Stadium, at MAPFRE Stadium, how was last night? How was the feeling? It must have been a bit special at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've told a lot of people this when talking about, the Save the Crew stuff over the last month or so, 2 months, I guess. When this city gets behind the team, especially late in the season, you can get things like that. I think back to 2008, obviously a pretty special year for Crew fans when they won MLS Cup. But that whole second half of the year going into the playoffs, the stadium was like that each week, especially late in the year. There were events around town where the team, I remember before they left for the first leg of the Eastern Conference Final, I think it was, they had a kind of a pep rally out at one of the outdoor malls here, and it was, tons of fans showed up, and it was a really cool thing. And even a couple of years ago in 2015, when the team really started to make a run towards the end of the season, and then obviously the push to MLS Cup, there was quite a bit of buzz, especially that week leading into MLS Cup. And I think, the combination of the team doing well and the Save the Crew stuff has caught on a little bit. I should say more than a little bit, obviously, with what's going on. I think that a lot of people were caught off guard with how many people would be there, and that's why you saw some of those long lines. As I'm sure most Toronto fans are aware that, this place doesn't sell out every week, and so fans are usually able to get in and out of the gates pretty quickly. But it was definitely special. I think that, if this had been instead of, kind of a point sticking out, we wouldn't be having any Save the Crew conversations. But, at least to see the city fans who aren't usually there come out and support. And as you mentioned, it was rocking. I mean, the atmosphere was great too. It wasn't just a bunch of, fans that came to sit on their hands, except for the supporter section. People were into it, which was cool. And even the first home playoff game against New York City, while the crowd wasn't as big, it was a loud, boisterous crowd. So they've had back-to-back good showings by the fans here in Columbus, which is nice to see from a Columbus perspective.
We don't need to speculate on how big the crowd's going to be in Toronto next week. It'll be a rocking crowd as well. Obviously, yeah. TFC will get 30,000 plus there, and we talked about the record a minute ago. I think it's fair to suggest that TFC is I don't know if overwhelming, but a considerable favorite in this game. But so let me just ask you this, Patrick, to wrap up. If the game does go Toronto's way next Wednesday, is it a successful season for the Crew? And as a follow-up to that, will the hashtag Save the Crew movement keep its momentum going forward if the season does end a week from today?
Yeah, I think that regardless of what happens next week, it'll be successful. Obviously, people will be disappointed. That includes players, staff, fans that the team didn't make MLS Cup. But, this team early in the season obviously struggled. Greg Berhalter was playing around with lineups, with tactics, and I think he got things figured out over the second half of the season. Obviously, they went on this run. I think making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, maybe isn't as far as they wanted to go, but this is a juggernaut of a Toronto team. This is, obviously a team that finished with the most points in MLS history. You can debate whether or not it's the best team in MLS history given points per game and whatnot, but certainly in the conversation. So while you obviously want to beat the best to on your way to a championship, I think that, you have to realize if you then lose to that team, what that team accomplished, especially if Toronto goes on and this year handles business in what looks to be a rematch with Seattle and wins the whole thing. So I would say it's a successful season. I think these guys have really come together. They found the group that really works well. And, so from that perspective, yes, I think it'll be successful. From the Save the Crew movement perspective, I think that'll be very interesting. Obviously, the diehard fans that have really, gone headfirst into the Save the Crew movement are going to continue fighting until there's nothing left to fight for. But, how much the coverage keeps up locally, outside of, us at Mass Report and, the Columbus Dispatch, which has done a great job covering it as well. But the local news stations, MLS Soccer, whether they keep covering things like that, there will certainly be stuff that goes on. Obviously there won't be games to have the banners and all that, But I'll be interested. I don't know. I know, from talking to people I know that have gotten really involved, they plan on keeping things going, but the coverage has to be there for it to be recognized as much as it has been over the last couple months. And it'll be interesting to see if we can continue to make that happen from what we have at SB Nation and like I said, the local newspaper in town.
All right, Patrick. I'm a Torontonian, so I'm not going to wish you luck, but I'm going to wish you luck on the Save the Crew. We'll see what happens next week, and regardless, I'm pretty happy that the MLS Cup Final is either going to be in my hometown or is going to be the circus that it will be if it's in Columbus. So there
That's
you
a good
go.
way to put it.
Yeah, there you have it. All right. So how can people follow you?
Yep, I'm on Twitter at _Pat_Murphy. And then at massreport.com is where you'll find my work for the crew stuff. We'll have tons of stuff from that perspective this week. I try and keep up on what's going on with the opponent too. So maybe we'll try and include some of Greg Vanny's stuff. I think he's a real sharp guy. I always enjoy talking to him. Last night I thought he was a real good post game, and that's always good to see. Sometimes you get opposing coaches that just don't give you much. He's great to deal with.
All right, fair enough. Pat Murphy, Massive Report. Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
Thanks. Talk to you later, guys.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. 0-0. It was a fun game. Seattle-Houston was a bit different. 2-goal for Seattle on the road. A missed penalty, but still a second goal. Who other than Will Bruin?
That was a great penalty save. But,
the shot was great too. Like, it wasn't like a terrible penalty kick. It was like well done, but it was well saved. But you know what I thought was hilarious? Will Bruin scoring against Houston. Like, come on.
And he kind of celebrated.
No, he did celebrate. And he was like smiling, pointing towards his chest. If I was a Houston fan, I'd be like, well, what are you doing? You can't do this to
I'm
us.
okay with that. I think that players should celebrate their accomplishments when they score. And
it's about the present. Duane, you never win anything dwelling about the past,
That is true. That is absolutely true. No, look. To talk about the other game quickly, the red card obviously changed a lot. I mean, they were already down a goal when it happened, and then the penalty. They were thankfully they saved the penalty. It sort of keeps the tie in play, although it is a awfully tall task for Houston to come back from 2 goals down at home. As we've talked at length about their ability to win on the road, and they've turned it around a little bit in the second half of the season. Obviously, got that win against an undermanned Portland team in the conference semis, but I'm trying to talk myself into believing there's a chance here. There really isn't, is there?
No, Seattle looking like the stronger of the two, and now they're going home. So, it's Seattle's got the advantage, and the presence of Dempsey at this point, which wasn't last year. Remember, he had some heart problems. His heart has had a different rhythm of beating. That was the problem.
Yes.
Not like cardiac problem, but like, anyways.
Yeah.
Now
he was
presence
out with an injury. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Roman Torres will miss the second leg, by the way, for a late yellow card, which basically pulled a Callum Malice, stood in front against Bitajour. Thank God the player for Houston didn't have a perforated spleen, but Roman Torres was a wall in that play, got himself a yellow card, and will miss the second leg. But even without Roman Torres, I do feel Seattle has the upper hand here, literally and, well, even more figuratively.
Well, they can lose in advance. I mean, they're in a better shape than TFC was coming into that second leg against New York, and obviously TFC needed every bit of that advantage they got in the first leg in hindsight. But the rematch looks increasingly likely, and we'll talk a lot about that at length. And I've actually already booked Dave Clark for next week to preview that game, so we'll have a chat about Seattle in the very near future from a Seattle perspective. But certainly Look, the Sounders have the experience of going deep in the playoffs several years in a row, finally getting the job done last year. Regardless of how they did it, they got the job done. And there's just very little chance that Houston comes. The only way Houston wins this game is if they somehow get an early goal. That's really, it comes down to that. I think that they have to open up and they have to look to get a goal in the first 30 minutes in my mind so that they can have that hope, have that belief in themselves to get the second goal to tie it up. 2-2 will send it to extra time, obviously. But it's an awfully tall task when it comes to that. But to get back, Kevin, to TFC Columbus, I think the conversation with Patrick almost ironically made me feel better about the game. Because, look, it's like you were anxious about it as a TFC supporter. And I'm not going to lie about this. I mean, I try to take a somewhat detached view of TFC, especially on this show. I really do. But at this point in the season, it's very, very difficult to not be completely partisan about things because it's so close right now, right? There's only 2 games left, and
well, you made me realize that earlier. It's true though. 2 more wins. That's what it takes. That's it. That's home too.
Will not play another road game this year.
If you win the next one, because there's only 2 games if you win the next one. It all comes down to the next one. But you're right.
TFC does not need to travel outside of Toronto again. They may not have an opportunity to play a second home game, but
they have to go to Vaughan. They kind of have to travel to Vaughan on a daily basis. But I'm just being semantic here.
He is actually technically in Toronto. It's almost in Vaughan.
Fine. Yes, it is technically in Toronto.
It is south of Steele. So there you go. Yes. All right. Anyway, we're getting into Toronto geography geekdom here now.
No, but it's interesting to me how, like, now. We've been talking about this for months. Toronto's favorite to win the MLS Cup. It's not like favorite doesn't cut it for me anymore. It's theirs to lose. It's literally, that's how I see it. It's if they don't score, they're not going to win the trophy. But that's about it. They need their scoring boots back on the field basically, and Giovinco and Altidore are back next week. So they score 2 goals from now to the end of the season. The way Bono's been playing, this might be enough to win the cup. 2 goals might be enough.
2 free kicks. I gave them an 80-20 chance heading in, and that was sort of me stepping back and giving Columbus a 20% chance to win the tie. I'll back it to 90-10 now. That means there's still 10% chance that Columbus wins this. So that's, people, this is famous with my old, what was it, 2% I gave, or 1%?
One of the famous 1% for Canada's women's national team to win the World Cup in 2015.
Yeah, which was still giving them a 1% chance, and people think that's disrespectful. I think it's just reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's at least, it's a chance, so it's that.
Yeah, there's teams with 0% chance when it comes down to it. Like, if you're a New York City FC fan, there's a 0% chance you're winning the MLS Cup. I give Columbus a 2% chance they're going to win it. So there you go. Nonetheless, when it comes to that game next week, exactly, as you said, I mean, look, they've had a dream season, 69 points, Supporters Shield champions, Voyageurs Cup champions, all-time points record. They are plus 6 billion and on the goal differential. It's not quite that, but you know what I mean. It's all in their hands now. They win 2 home games. They just got to get 2 home results, and they have extra time to do it too. Like, they can have a draw, as long as it's not a scored draw, because a scored draw will obviously give it to Columbus. But they can take this into stoppage time and have an extra 30 minutes to find that goal. There's really no excuse at this point, and that's got to be the way you look at this. If you're a TFC fan, if you're a TFC player, if you're a TFC official, coach, whatever, you've got to look at this is that there's literally no excuse for them not to win the MLS Cup now. Win 2 home games and you're champions. And if you had told me in the depth, like in August 2012, if you had ridden your TARDIS back and you had said to me, Duane, I'm going to give you the opportunity to watch TFC have to win 2 home games to win the MLS Cup, are you going to take that? Damn right I am. It's an opportunity for TFC now, and they didn't. What was my fear yesterday, Kevin? I said I was fearful that they would come home multiple goals down. They are not. They didn't get their away goal. That would have been the dream scenario if they were coming home ahead. But this is pretty much as the second best you could have hoped for. They're not ahead, but they didn't allow, and they're even Steven, just have to win. And there's no excuse not to. If they don't, then you have tip to Columbus. And will pout for 3 days and get back at it if that's the case and start to look forward to the CCL. But you gotta have good hope now if you're a TFC fan.
All right, let's take a very small break and talk about the Champions League from yesterday and today.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network.
And we're back on Soccer Today, Champions League. Duane, you remember my famous words now from yesterday saying, Duane, if you have one game to watch, how about that Sevilla-Liverpool game? Well, turns out I was pretty damn right.
3-0 is a very dangerous league in the Champions League. It's something Liverpool fans know well enough.
Is 3-0 the new 2-0? It's like 3-0 is the new most dangerous lead in football.
And, well, a decade or so apart and the opposite side this way. Klopp did not look happy when that third goal went in too. It's like Liverpool is immensely entertaining. I don't know if they're good, but they're immensely entertaining. And they're still on top of the group. They still control their own destiny. I was to look the other day too. This is something that really surprised me. It has been Liverpool has not made the knockout stage of the Champions League this decade. That's that's crazy when you think back on it, right?
Since 2010, basically. Yeah, since the money came. Yeah. Since the money came to the Premier League, basically.
Yeah, exactly. It's yeah.
Sorry, Liverpool fans. But yeah, you'll get back there with the new seats at Anfield and the more income, and when you'll sell Coutinho, you'll have money.
Yeah, well, they'll go sell him, and well, that's the question. If they make the knockout stage, they're not going to sell him in January, are they? Look, yeah, 3-3 Sevilla. That group is the most entertaining group. It's been, and I tweeted this out yesterday during the game. It's not been a particularly entertaining group stage. There's not a lot of drama there. There's a couple groups that are in flux, but really the big teams are just dominating this year, and that doesn't make for the most compelling of Champions League group stage. Obviously was focused a lot on the City game yesterday, and it took them a while, but they did get the job done in the 89th minute. Raheem Sterling had a great game and managed to get the goal at the end to make them undefeated. They've only drawn twice. I mean, this is
not bad.
Terrifying.
It's almost Tottenham worthy. Tottenham's having a great performance in the Champions League. They are undefeated as well. So there's something about England teams outside Liverpool in the Champions League in 2017.
Well, Liverpool's still winning the group, though. I mean,
yeah, true. But Chelsea's all right. True, Roma beat Chelsea. So no, you're right. It's just about Tottenham and Man City. They're pretty damn good this year.
Yeah, and look, we were joking at the City bar yesterday is that obviously City, based on their history, is going to win the group and have the most dominating Champions League performance ever, and then they're going to draw Real Madrid in the second round because that's just how it's going to happen. Like I'm okay with this now. I just know it's going to happen.
6-0 yesterday, Real Madrid versus Apoel. It was quite a destruction. Like, when you're watching on TV, like I don't know, exhibition of like actual players versus amateurs. Well,
yeah.
That's what I was watching yesterday when I tuned into the Apoel Nicosia Real Madrid match. That Benzema goal to start over with like a triangle overlap passing scheme that I think it was 15 passes, and then behind the third man coming down towards the net, Benzema all alone finishes it like it's a video game, and it seems so easy yesterday for Madrid.
Well, it really does. And look, it begs the question whether they need to tweak this format a little bit because, as I said, the top teams are dominating. And maybe you go have a slightly small, like 3-team groups or something, and have the top 16 teams in the world go in at around a 32 or something. I don't know. Like, I'm just thinking out loud right now because these games aren't particularly compelling. There aren't particularly a lot of drama involved in this. It's other than Napoli. Napoli is maybe the one team and they still have a chance with their win yesterday as well to go over top to advance to the second team. They're still in it. They have to get the win and hope that City does the job for them. But there's just there's no upsets in this. Atletico maybe. I guess that would be the other upset in this. Atletico, and they're having a bit of a down season, aren't going to get through. But look, it's just not been a lot of entertainment. It's like wake me up in February is kind of the approach to this, and I'm not sure what the answer to is. And
Well,
they're not going to
it
change
depends.
anything anyway because the money's
Depends.
there.
If you like goals, it was entertaining because there's been a lot of blowouts. There's been a few 3, 4, 5, 6-0s. And that was fun. PSG has been fun to watch. Anyways, we'll continue today. There's a few interesting games today as well. Speaking of PSG, today, 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time this afternoon at the Parc des Princes in Paris, PSG versus Celtic. That will be an interesting matchup. Brendan Rodgers and the best Scottish team are traveling to Paris too for a difficult one, but Atletico Madrid-Roma is an interesting matchup as well.
No, for sure. And look, Atleti has been disappointing this year, both in League and in Champions League. But I guess, maybe that's to be expected. They've been cycling up for several years, 2 Champions League finals, and they're going to be remorseful of that late goal against Real Madrid for forever, right? Like they were so close to winning the Champions League, and for a club of that size and that history, that would have been a remarkable accomplishment. But alas, it seems to have passed now.
And the other interesting game, Juventus-Barcelona, is another interesting one.
Well, yeah, that's got some sizzle to that. Now, the hope here is that there haven't really been, maybe Spurs BBB yesterday was one of those big sizzle games that did live up to the hype a little bit. Spurs with the comeback and 5 goals in that game as well. A lot of the games that we've hyped to death have not really turned out. I mean, the last time Barcelona and Juventus played, it was kind of a one-sided game. So let's hope today that we get something to watch. But yeah, I mean, look, it's the top teams are going to get through, and we're gonna draw balls in a month or so, and we're gonna find out. That's what the Champions League is all about, and it's going to be awfully exciting in February because the top teams are all going to be part of it. But for right now, not so much.
Well, you mentioned a draw. I'm excited actually for December 1st, the World Cup draw, and we'll see what we do. We might do one of those famous live shows or something, but it could be interesting. I like draws when it's the Champions League, yeah, but the World Cup draw, that's a big draw.
Oh, it's always spectacular. Do you remember the German one? It was so weird. It was just so weird. And the Russians are weird people too, so this is going to be weird entertainment.
No offense.
It's going to be amazing.
No offense to our Russian listeners. Yeah, we don't mean that you're weird as a person. We just mean like your television shows that you put feels kind of weird to us.
Dancing bear or something. Like you just know it. Like Putin's gonna ride out naked on a horse. It's gonna be spectacular.
Come on, that's a trope now. It's like we almost expect it to happen, so it won't.
Exactly. Or naked on a polar bear. I don't know.
Oh, maybe yeah. Poor polar bear.
It'd be awesome. It's also the day of my company's Christmas party, so it's going to be a good day. So we'll have to do the live show and be entertained that day for sure. I'm looking forward to that.
All right. You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. The show is located at Soccer Today SPN and available on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Android, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and so on and so forth. So you can get the show wherever you get your podcast or live on our YouTube page, which you can find a link anywhere on our social media or at sportspodcastingnetwork.com. As always, until tomorrow, enjoy your soccer today, watch the Champions League, and have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.